bottom, the people pleasing, the bottom of the, it could be, I saw the recording process, it threw me off a little bit. Getting to the bottom of codependency, we want to maximize productivity, but also one of the things I love doing is going against the industry I'm in that is so popular. These days, if you look in the self-help section, billion-dollar industry. I mean, billions of dollars. And the funny thing is when I'm doing client clarity, I always ask a client, why do you want to work with me? I'm sure I'm not the first stop you've had on the road. And they always say, I tried BetterHelp. And then I found out you were a lot better. Even one of the first clients I took after taking a year off from counseling in July 2020 said, I knew somebody who was 3 times a doctorate with more degrees than a thermostat. And I saw your content and I looked at your recommendation section. And I said, he's the one I want to work with. And so I'm someone who's going to give a client the biggest bang for their buck and really help them maximize productivity by going not so far into their past, but just enough to then focus on the future and then get a specific roadmap ahead that helps them get results.
I love it. Something we have talked about a few times, but I think will be great for you to share with everyone is you run an organization called Listen, Then Speak. And I think that's so critical, especially for this conversation and everything else that we do on a daily basis. Everyone here is a recruiter or a talent acquisition leader. Why listen, then speak? Tell everyone about that.
Well, if anyone has sat in any therapy session, any coaching session, or just lived life, I would like to think I'm with friends in the 30 and over crew, or at least 25 and over crew. I know I was one of 3 senior counselors before coming back here to DC in 2017. You know my story well. And we would train the other counselors. And I would say the poorest session would be when I would see the counselor doing all the talking. 90% of your session should be listening. 10% should be you offering up information and advice and practical applicable solutions to what you've heard because you've heard the pain points. And I believe one of the books that I work with clients through is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Steve Covey says it so well, seek to understand rather than be understood. Part of that is listening, not just twice, I would say 5 times more than you speak, so that way you can carefully assess, how do I approach this in a way that's redemptive and not destructive?
I love it. Okay. I said at the beginning, but no one could see my face, so I'm going to say it again. This will be a very real conversation. Please feel free to put any comments or questions into the chat as we're going. I will save time at the end for it. This is a safe space. I talked to Jahmaal about a lot of different things. I'm prepared to be honest about my own background with struggling with boundaries and mental health, and we're going to get really real into it today. So I hope everyone gets a lot of value from this. So let's start with a simple thing. Let's start with, what does setting boundaries mean? And then why is it important for recruiters and talent acquisition professionals?
Oh man, I think this is a huge one, is because you think about the field of recruiters and those who find themselves in talent acquisition, they end up playing what? More than one role. I mean, if you think about legal, and I know this legal people aren't on here, but anytime you work in legal, you end up being the jack of all trades. And it's the same way in recruiting. It's the same way in talent acquisition. It's like you end up being marketing. You actually end up being housing sometimes. We can go there later in another conversation. You end up being so many things that aren't on your KPIs. And so it's important that when you come into this position, and however long you've been working this position, that you understand what your non-negotiables are. For those of us who have gardens, I live in a major city. The best gardens are those that have a boundary line around them, where this is the line of demarcation, especially when you live in a major city where there's all sorts of junk everywhere. And so it's very important to know, not just to know, but to also identify and believe in your non-negotiables and continue to practice that. If you don't practice it, you don't perfect it. And I think boundaries are very important for people in this space. One, because they get it from each direction. They're getting it from their managers, they're getting it from the C-suite, but they're also getting it from the clients that they're trying to onboard. And so when you are in that position, if you don't have your boundaries established, you will operate and lead with fear. And when fear is your motivation, you'll find yourself overreaching. And when you overreach and go overboard, you're going to wear yourself out. And you'll say, well, I'm excellent. I'm doing my job. I actually even got a raise, but your mental health is at an all-time low because you're actually not locked into your maximum productivity. If you're on the laptop till 11:45, 1 o'clock in the morning, it's a clear indicator that you don't have your non-negotiables established, and there's no real boundary lines to actually keep you from hitting a wall.
Absolutely. So something you said to me the other day, and I think is a great way to look at it. You have to step back in order to go farther. And I think for a lot of us, we're very driven in our careers. We're very motivated to do what we do. So thinking about taking a step back can be a source of fear. We fear that rejection. We fear not living up to what people expect of us. So why do you encourage people to take that step back in order to move forward and level up?
Oftentimes, I mean, let's just keep it real. If you don't know where you've been, you're going to have a hard time knowing where you're going. When you don't have clarity, you end up wandering aimlessly. And especially if you think about the place of talent acquisition and recruiting, things move fast. Stuff happens fast. One example, I know we went over this, but also I live here in a major city. I live in Washington, D.C., not in Maryland, not in Virginia. I'm right in the thick of it. And so most people don't know because if you see my content or see my videos or even see my podcast, I usually look like this. But at nighttime and with dusk, this is what I look like because I need to see certain things on the road. I need to see warning signs. And if you live in a major city, just know that there are skulls and crossbones, different red signs, different neon signs that says, okay, these are the warning signs. And so many times, if you don't step back and get clarity of thinking and know the psychology, but behind why you walk the earth, what your family history is, what your own history is, why you believe what you believe, you won't have a clear roadmap of how to move forward. And so a lot of times that's why it's keen to stop. Okay, well, let me pause and let me understand, wait a minute, why did I enter this profession? Why do I do what I do? What am I bringing with me when I show up? And when I show up, what is my output? And could my output be placed in a different section that actually makes me more productive? And am I allowing myself to be led by fear? Why is that fear there? When you stop and pause and start to ask those questions and actually work with somebody that can see those blind spots, like I want to say this and I want to be careful because I know there are a lot of beautiful women on this panel. We are all Mack trucks in different ways. So we have a lot of mirrors. We got ourselves set up pretty well to move down the road, but even that Mack truck has tons of blind spots. You need somebody to actually define those blind spots and peer into those areas. So there's real clarity of vision and there's a roadmap moving forward. Because when things move fast, it's just in all of us to wander aimlessly. And then when we hit that brick wall, we feel like, oh, now I need a therapist. Now I need someone to work with. It's like you could have actually not avoided this, but you could actually position yourself better for your maximum productivity, not just with your manager, but also with your candidates. But you got to understand what you're thinking. The mind is the control tower to the body.
Two things resonate with me there. I think remembering your why always. We can't let our why be buried, and our why needs to define everything that we are doing because we are in people pleasing roles, right? Recruiters, talent acquisition professionals, we are very front facing, we're very customer service centric, and it can become a lot to take on the weight of everyone. Like you said, you're getting it from the candidate side and then you're getting it top down from the management side. I've spoken on this a couple of times, and you and I have talked many times about this, about people in people pleasing roles. They often forget to take care of themselves. They forget to focus on these boundaries and mental health because we're so focused on being people pleasers and empaths. And I'm not going to speak for you because you have a lot of great thoughts on this about the empaths and the people pleasers. Why do you why do you think we all end up in these roles, and why do you think that we ignore ourselves for the betterment of others?
That's a great question. Krista, the funny thing is when you think about the whole space of talent acquisition and recruiting, it is like an empath's paradise, or at least it starts that way. And the funny thing about empaths is that they have an attitude of they want to see everyone win. They don't want to leave money on the table. They want to see you be the best version of you, land in the organization that's perfect for you. And recruiting is full of empaths. But the strange thing about that is that empaths are often, and some of my clients, I can't use names, from a legal standpoint, they typically tend to be drawn to narcissists, or narcissists are drawn to them. And a while ago, I did a video that was very controversial. This had to be over a year ago, but it was called The Narcissist Within. And having to examine, where do I have that need to be needed in a way that causes me to go overboard in a manner that is not healthy? Why do I allow this person's reactions or response to me, whether good or bad, be the thing that controls me and the very thing that defines my day, my week, my month, how the half of my year or my quarters go? Why is this thing the very rudder that puts me on autopilot? where I don't even understand why I'm functioning the way I function until it hits me like, how much time have I wasted even recruiting a certain candidate that I took more of an interest in than needed to be taken, you know? And
Mhm.
how much time am I leaving on the table? Could I have staffed another position long ago if I dealt with my own implicit biases and prejudices? And I'm not speaking on a racial. Let's put that aside. Our own implicit biases of he's male, she's female, you know, certain things about their personality just kind of don't jam with me because I haven't dealt with my own psychology, my own belief systems, my own trauma, my own things that have stockpiled throughout my life. And so I'm going overboard in these things, and I'm not dealing with the fear that actually causes me to move in ways that are not healthy, in ways that are not good for my position. And so I find myself, even though my output is great, I'm getting praise from a manager, I still find myself not productive, and I find myself not able to sleep at night because my mind's supposed to be at 50, but it's actually at 1,000. I'm overthinking all of my productivity. And so unfortunately, the realm of talent acquisition is it's a people realm. It's a people that's what it is. It's people services. And I think a lot in that they head for burnout and they hit brick walls because they haven't dealt with their own psychology. And a lot of times, in many ways, especially during the talent acquisition process, they find themselves overreaching and overgiving.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the overreaching. What does overreaching mean? What happens when people are doing that?
It could be, you know, I think we all have just people that we jam with, that we gel with really well. But you may find yourself overreaching with certain candidates in a way that's not healthy. And I don't mean in a sense of anything sexual or anything illegal or anything like that, but because you see certain things in them and yourself or things you take an interest in, and they're not the best person for that job. You've actually staffed someone with an organization that is actually going to produce turnover at some point because of the interest you've taken in them. See, when you understand your own psychology, the way you think, the way you believe, your family history, the way you walk the earth, you staff the organization with the best person for them because you also understand things about the organization that they're going to. And you don't allow the pressure coming from the top or the pressure coming from the bottom to cause you to move too quickly or too slow. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to shift the topic a little bit to something else we've talked about quite a few times. We hear a lot about work-life balance, right? We hear all of the things about setting work-life balance. Some people really struggle with it. I know I used to. Now I am out on the weekend. I have set those boundaries on Saturdays and Sundays. I am out. I am not present on LinkedIn, maybe a comment or two, but that is my time. That's my Liam time. That's my non-negotiable. But I don't always think that it's just about a work-life balance boundary being set if we're not setting boundaries at work. And I've been really honest with you because we are friends. I've been honest with you about not setting those boundaries at work. So even though I maybe had a distinction between a work-life balance, my work boundaries were a colossal nightmare. It was like an apocalyptic bomb went off at work because I was taking everything on. So even though I had a work-life balance, my work was still destroying me. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who do that too. Boundaries are very difficult to set up. So when we're thinking about work-life balance, that's my big introduction to this question. When we think about a work-life balance, why do we still need to focus on boundaries in them as succinct and separate categories, not just delineating between them?
I think let's just speak quantifiably because I know a lot in the mental health space is very qualitative. We got to remember we're spending at least, even if you're working in a position that you love and you're thriving in, you're spending at least 40 to 60 hours per week. So you're spending most of your time at this place. And so if there is no balance, if when you're at this place, you're at 1,000, you're headed towards a brick wall. And when you're at this place and you haven't established your non-negotiables, there is no balance in that. You know, if you're not taking even your lunch break, taking breaks from your workstation, closing your laptop, if you're in the office and you're finding yourself not taking those 20-minute sprints of walks that actually help you get off the computer, you will find that your productivity starts to lack. The funny thing about it is when even I myself in the past, when I was in that position where I just had to be everything to everybody, I would find myself sending an email or corresponding with a client or corresponding with a vendor that I'm podcasting with or someone a panel I'm supposed to jump on, and like, I didn't mean to misspell that word, or I didn't mean to say that, or that got misconstrued. Your mind can only cognize so much when you're just going. And so for your maximum productivity, it is important to step back and take breaks. Now, a lot of times, if you're in fear or you're in isolation, you're not going to do that. And you couple that with your own psychology and the way that you show up, it's just like, I'm going and going and going and going until I hit that brick wall. And sometimes for some people, depending on the way you think, that brick wall is a badge of honor. But the very thing you work so hard to build up, that reputation, unwittingly, you begin to tear down your own reputation. The very thing you fear the most is obviously you want to make a living, you don't want to get fired. That could be the case when you hit that brick wall and you have no productivity left because you don't have any boundaries that are established. And you don't even know what those boundaries are for yourself as an individual, much less the team you're on. You don't know what your non-negotiables are. When you don't identify these things, a lot of times they say knowledge is power. That's a fallacy. I want to get rid of that lie today. Knowledge applied and believed is power, because what you believe is going to be indicative of what you do and the pattern that you carry out.
Well, if we don't apply the knowledge, why are we absorbing it and why are we taking it on and we're not using it to make any better decisions? So I totally agree with you on that. Non-negotiables. If you are someone who is recognizing that they're starting to struggle, setting those non-negotiables can be difficult because sometimes you think you have to take on more and more and more. And I think today is timely that it's International Women's Day, and not saying that men don't struggle with this at all. I know they do as well, but I do think it's timely with this conversation being on International Women's Day because it can be very tough for women who are fighting to get farther ahead in their careers. Their children are at home. They have to balance all of that unpaid labor that we're often not recognized for. It's a second full-time job. It's exhausting having kids. So setting those non-negotiables when you have this heavy, heavy, heavy guilt of work, home, candidates, leadership, that can be so impossible. And I know I struggled with that for a long time, and I'm probably not in the clear completely. I'm going to be honest. This is real talk day. I'm probably not in the clear completely, but where do people start identifying their non-negotiables when they're so buried in all of that weight that I just said?
Yeah, I would say, well, and this is not like a shameless plug. You have to actually work with someone to help you do that. When you're buried and things are moving that fast, you're just not going to take the time to do it. And I'm going to give some personal testimony. One, I want to say happy International Women's Day to all the women who are watching, and to all the dads that support them and all the men in their life. Happy International Women's Day. Recently, as you know, my injury, I had a left knee injury, 9 months, physical therapy. And in that time, I gained 44 pounds of unwanted weight. It was very hard. I couldn't physically act the way I was, and then I'm older now. I'm nearly 40. So it's like, you don't just look at the gym and pounds melt off. I had to actually start seeing a personal trainer and actually even get behind, as someone who is a counselor who works in the mental health field, the psychology of what I was thinking and why I was, not tracking macros and how I was working out, was the best time in my rest patterns. And so even in that, someone who could see things that I couldn't, which is their area of expertise. And so it is very important, to actually see a professional to help you identify your non-negotiables, because with a mom is I don't even want to say a full-time job, it's an overtime job. You will not take the time to stop and identify that, or you'll write it on a journal somewhere and it'll just be in the attic collecting dust. I would really, really encourage people to if one of the things you can do now from an action item standpoint is get your notepad out, start writing, what are my non-negotiables? Even if it doesn't make sense, at least do a brainstorm. The brainstorm is going to help you. Even if it's not even true about you, it's like, well, that's not a non-negotiable for me, And I would say even people under the sound of your voice and my voice will say, well, I have all that established. If you did, you would be at your maximum productivity. And it takes getting honest with yourself. And a lot of times for people like us, especially the empaths, it's difficult to get honest with yourself without another set of eyes. I know when I'm sending out an email that's going to hundreds of thousands of people, you better believe I get another set of eyes on it before I send it out. You guys are in positions where you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people. It's better to get another set of eyes on your life, because that's going to affect your output.
When I was, and I've shared some of this on Global TA Day as well, and I'm not calling out any employer by name, but a couple of years ago, I was so buried in the work, and it was a toxic work environment for me. I've been pretty honest and transparent about that. And I had a lot of guilt put on me that I wasn't doing enough. I was flat out told I was not hiring enough. It was going to be my fault if there weren't people in the building or if teams were shut down. And I internalized all that and I kept going and going and going. I thought it was just normal. I thought it was just real life. But when I started to talk to people outside of my sphere, when I started joining the LinkedIn world and making connections and taking them offline and building my network out, people showed me those blind spots and they said, Krista, it's not normal that you're recruiting by yourself for 190 roles. It's not normal that you hired 1,200 people by yourself and you haven't slept in 6 months. This was COVID. COVID was a very different time. And I know you want to talk about how we're just learning to live again since COVID, but I don't know if I would have ever seen it. And I put myself in the hospital. I made myself very, very, very ill. It was about 8 months of me being extremely sick, and they could not figure out what was going on. And now, because someone took me out of my own head and said, this isn't normal, Krista, this is not the way it's supposed to be, then I could recognize what those were. And now I will never go back to that because I know what my boundaries are. And that's why I'm so passionate about a topic like this, because I know I'm not the only one doing that. I know I'm not the only one who's internalizing the guilt that they feel. But segue into the next part that I want to talk about is the communication piece. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health, and we're afraid to admit weakness no matter where you work. If you're a recruiter, you're a leader, you're a decision maker. How do people start to broach those conversations with their leaders to say, man, I'm having a really hard time and I can't go on?
That's a great question, Krista. And I just want to say I appreciate your honesty and your transparency before all these people in this panel, because I know this is being recorded, so other people are going to hear this as well. I want to start just by acknowledging the comments and questions from Savannah and Tina and other ones in the comment section. And we're going to try to definitely get to those later. The safe place for everyone, whether you're a manager, whether you're a recruiter, whether you're the one who's the head of the staff, is that in the last 3 years, we are all doing our best to try to find out how to live life again. You know, we as not just United States, but as a global community got knocked off our axis. And in a sense, we had to find a new normal. And it took 2.5 years to actually get somewhere close to normal, which we're still not yet. So there's already a safety net there to come before your manager or even your upper level management and say, hey, I present the vision, present your interest, obviously in the organization. Your KPIs should be speaking for themselves, but then say, you know what, I really want to see this organization win. I want to staff this organization with the top level staff. Whether you're an entrepreneur, I want to staff this small business, but I want to make sure that my mental health is an optimal level. And I'm seeing myself slipping. I'm seeing myself kind of hitting for a wall right now. I think they'll want to have that conversation based on where we've been. I think 3 years ago, it may have been a little bit more difficult to have conversations like this, but now we want to maybe normalize that. And I think it should be more of the rule than the exception. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. On the other side of it, leaders need to be ready to have those crucial conversations. And I think we all know on this call that not every organization provides a ton of training when someone moves into management, whether it's for a promotion. My organization that I'm with now, they spent so much time investing in my leadership and developing my training and how to work with people and how to be an exceptional listener, because they recognize how important it is for me as a leader to be able to respond to all of my team's needs. But we know that the sad reality is that not a lot of places do that. We will have many conversations as recruiters where hiring managers are not told how to hire. They're not trained how to interview people. So I think we know that there's that knowledge gap there. So we talked about recruiters, how to bring those conversations forward. How can leaders be prepared for those conversations when it's really uncomfortable for them or they're not sure where to begin? What can they do?
And that's where Jahmaal, not the counselor, but Jahmaal, the consultant, comes into play.
Yeah.
A lot of times in these situations, we have managers that were promoted. They've done excellent work, they've proven themselves, and they've been moved up. But let's just put the secret out there. Allegedly, they didn't want to manage. They just wanted to keep being an amazing recruiter, amazing person in talent acquisition, but they've been moved up. And so a lot of times managers, they're looking to just be they're looking to just be the SME, the subject matter expert. They're looking to just be paired with another SME. They're like, I don't really want to manage a staff right now. I don't want direct reports, but you've been given that assignment. And so really preparing managers to understand their own psychology. I know, and you know my story, I started my career as a little 18-year-old intern at the Department of Justice and Public Affairs. I had to remember that I brought my full self through that door. You know, we love to compartmentalize, especially when it comes to management, and just say, okay, now I'm manager. I'm at such and such organization, such and such government, such and such, NGO. But you bring yourself, your family history, your belief system, your patterns, your psychology. Let's get a little squirrely, your addictions, if you have them. You bring all of that through the door with you. And that stays with you 40 to 60 to potentially, if you don't have the good boundaries, 80 hours that you're working. And so getting managers ready to give them a safe place to offload. A lot of times they don't have the safe place because they're a manager now. So it's like, and if you think about our social media world, we're told to look Teflon. We're told, we see all the posts about leadership and what that looks like. It's like, well, I don't line up to that. And we compare ourselves, and then we begin to shrink, and we wonder, why is institutional knowledge walking out the door? Why am I not prepared my staff to thrive? It's like, I don't even know how to do this. And so actually working with a consultant and working with a counselor that can get you to understand your own psychology, so you prepare your staff to thrive. And you can understand one-on-one why they think the way they do. How do I buoy them up in a way that boosts morale? And so we function together as a team like a well-oiled machine. You don't want your staff using their lunch break, the 20 to 30 minutes they get, to look for another job. Let's just speak from because I know some people on this call and people who will hear this will only respond to numbers. The moment there's turnover in an organization, and this is just on the NGO level, that's $6,000 to $10,000 each time someone leaves and come back in just to onboard someone. On the corporate level, that could be almost $20,000. Think about how much money you can save the C-suite and the board. They're going to respond to those numbers when they see you're keeping your team intact. And a lot of times when people don't know their own psychology, they're going to function on autopilot. And when they function on autopilot, they're actually burning out their own staff. So we want to prepare managers to be both compassionate and assertive in a way that increases productivity and reduces turnover. You can be both compassionate and assertive when you actually have training on how to do that. You're not going to come in knowing that automatically, especially if that's not a part of your nature. And you could say, well, I'm an empath, but you could also be too compassionate in a way that doesn't move the needle forward and doesn't get projects done, or takes your team over scope creep. I'm getting into the weeds now. You pulled it out of me.
I know. I have so many good things here. I should have had my pen and paper ready. This is how all of our conversations go. Just so you all know, he's one of the most wonderful people to speak to, and every conversation you have with him will be just like this. But let's go turnover. If we are not proactive, I'm very proactive in a lot of the things I do for staffing, for consulting, with working with hiring managers. I'm proactive. I'm looking down the pipeline. Let's be realistic. People are not staying at their jobs for 20, 30 years like they used to. Being proactive applies to focusing on your mental health and that of your employees as well. The institutional knowledge that you lose when they walk out the door, not just the dollars. These are things that we as TA leaders need to bring forward to our leaders as well, to say this is something that we need to address because it's real life. People are struggling. The last 3 years have been terrible. Maybe some people are 100% Teflon and resilient, like you said, but I think a lot of people have struggles that we are not talking about. So it's naive to not be putting a plan in place to deal with the mental health and well-being of your employees, because they're struggling, right? When we lose that institutional knowledge because we haven't focused on our people, what are the ramifications of that?
Well, obviously your staff left. One of the quickest things that happens, they get overworked. A lot of times in talent acquisition, depending on the organization, depending on the needs, and depending on the position, it's going to take time. It's going to take 6 weeks, and sometimes it could take 4 or 5 months to restaff that position, or even a year. And so you think about when that institutional knowledge walks out the door, one, if systems and processes haven't been documented, you have to start from scratch. A lot of times projects fall through the cracks, work's not getting done. The rating of the organization is starting to fall. Stakeholders are looking at you like you're crazy because projects aren't getting done. And then the people that you have left, these are, I want to use the E word that may not be so popular, but these are your evangelists, those that believe in the mission, those that believe in the vision. They're actually starting to second guess themselves because they're finding that there's been 20 to 30 extra hours added onto what they're already putting out. So they're over output. And so when institutional knowledge walks out the door, it's like a snowball effect. And that domino effect can destroy a team. It can destroy an organization. And a lot of times it tends to be cyclical. And so when you look on Indeed or you look on Glassdoor, you're like, why is that the rating system? I thought they were such an awesome place and the recruiter didn't tell me this. It's because they have really high turnover and they have mental health and issues that have not been addressed at the root.
Absolutely. It is definitely a big problem. You did a post a couple weeks ago and you just mentioned it a minute ago about being compassionate but still an assertive leader, right? They don't have to be separate. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I would say a lot of those who are leading in talent acquisition, especially if you're an empath or if you're not, it's hard to make the dichotomy between that. And how do you find the nuance between the two in a way that's balanced, in a way that's redemptive? For myself, I typically tend to approach a matter wanting to listen. We talked about that when we started the call. What does listen then speak mean? And so when you listen to a matter in totality, you can assess the best pathway forward, how to move forward in a way that's productive for the team and for yourself as an individual. And I would say when you're leading, you do want to lead with compassion so that you understand your team, whoever your team makes up, whether it's 6, 7, 10 employees, or it could be a multiple employees, each one is an individual. You want to understand also not only your own psychology, but be able to discern their psychology so that there's compassion when they come to you with real life. You know, when a mom has a sick kiddo, guess what? That is the first thing on her mind. That's the most important thing to her. That is the hot button issue. The hot button issue is not staffing your next thing that said organization said to staff. It's, I got to get my kiddo. He or she is running a fever. And so understanding, okay, well, how am I assertive enough to still get the project done in a timely manner, but also still compassionately address my employee in a way that shows I want them to win? What does the win-win look like? And we got to understand the psychology behind that and understand not only what is the nuance, but how do we practically get there? What's the roadmap? Again, what you believe is always going to be indicative of what you do and how you approach situations, whether personally or professionally. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think the lines are a lot more blurred with what our home life is and our work life. There's been this mantra for years of you leave it at home, you don't bring it in. What happens at home stays at home, and all of that nonsense. But that's not reality. We know that. We know that we bring our whole selves to our job. And you brought up a perfect example. If our kiddos are not feeling well, that's all I can think about. When we have other stresses going on that are impacting our home life, it's hard for me to be my 100% present self. I still get the job done. I'm still probably very good at it, but I'm not putting my 100% self in. So recognizing when we need help is huge. And that is my big final question for you before we wrap up and switch into questions for people. You can start putting them into the chat, and Jahmaal and I will get to them. People on this call and people who are going to watch the recorded session later, maybe they don't know that they're struggling. Maybe they're not seeing those red flags or those warning signs. What should people be looking out for to see if that brick wall is coming? Is that brick wall imminent? What do they need to watch out for?
I would say always look at your schedule. We operate best on schedule, and obviously there's nuances to that because life happens. If you're up 11:45, 1:30 a.m. and the laptop is still open, that's an indication that you are going overboard and that you're overgiving. That's an indication that you are probably not maximizing your time, or you're actually overdrafted. You're probably staffing at a higher level than what is required. Again, I think we talked about this, but one thing I go with my clients with is the RACI. And I'm preaching to the choir here because most of you guys are in corporate spaces or in the NGO space, which is who is responsible, who's accountable, who's collaborative, who's informed. Look at your KPIs on even your own position and see what am I responsible for? What is to be my output? We're going to go above and beyond, but sometimes I think we make a mantra out of that in a way that's unhealthy. And so if you're going above and beyond that in a way where you're starting to lead with anxiety and lead with fear, it's going to reveal what you traffic in. And when you traffic in terror, you're going to be terrorized. And when you're terrorized, that affects the way you think and that affects your output. So that anxiety is starting to even affect your health. I can't speak from a legal standpoint and give a name away, but even working with a client recently, even after our first week together, they start to feel such a release in their physical body. I mean, in their gut, in their head, all the tension that was wrapped up for years. And just because a lot of times people may think because of some of the content I can put out can be pretty heavy that I have to have a huge traumatic event to qualify as a client for Jahmaal, but trauma a lot of times stockpiles a series of things that happen that affect the way we move the earth, that affect the way that how we believe and even how we work and what our output is. And so for those who think, well, I'm good, I'm pretty decent, start to look at your output. Start to look at the way you process intel, the way you even process content, the way you process information. And if you find that anxiety and fear are two very close things that are very close knitted to you right now, you're starting to hit that wall. Start looking at the way that you deal, if you're a manager, the way you deal with your team. Are you trying to be their best friend in a way that's not moving the needle forward? Or also a way that you're comparing them amongst one another, institutional knowledge is walking out the door and you don't understand their psychology as individuals and as a collective. And as an employee, to your manager, are you looking to overgive? When you're getting hell from above and you're also getting hell from beneath with candidates, what is the psychology behind the way that you staff? Are you taking too long because you've gone overboard with one to, like, let's say 7 candidates, and you have 17 people that are highly qualified that you could just staff them because you understand them, so these things will reveal, whether you're headed for a wall or not, and then see some of your patterns outside of work. Are you giving into emotional eating? I want to see, and I know this may not be a popular thing, but are there habits in your life that you find shameful, that you're guilty of, that are actually lowering your productivity? Addictions is part of the work that I do, because anytime we have this much pressure, we have to take that somewhere. We're going to numb that pain if we're not careful, and that can really cause us to hit a wall. Look at the patterns outside of work. Look at the way you're dealing with your family. Are you fully present? When you need to be in the room with your family, are you looking at your phone? Are you waiting to open laptop again to start staffing an agency? So just look at some of these patterns and to really identify, like, wait a minute, I think that might be me. Or if you're the head of a recruiting, a talent acquisition organization, what are the things? What are some of the patterns and the habits that you have? What are your outlets? Your outlets a lot of times reveal the way you think and what you're believing at the time. Is anxiety the main motivation behind the outlets that you have that are unhealthy, that you're not happy about? So those are some things to look at.
I think for me, my biggest thing was I was focusing every decision and every meeting and every email and all the hours I was working. Sorry, I think my internet is going unstable. Sorry, everyone. Canadian winter, the internet is not great here. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. But my big indicator was I was doing it because I thought everyone would be looking at me thinking I wasn't doing enough. Even though I was putting in 18, 19-hour days, I would come home, I would have my Liam time, it would be dinner time, bath time, bedtime, and then I'd be back on the laptop for 5-6 hours at night because I was so afraid that everyone else would think I wasn't doing enough. And it almost killed me. And I don't want anyone else to be in that position either. So, all right, let's go with how can people find you? I will put your LinkedIn profile into the chat so people can find you, but tell people a little bit about you, your services, how they can find you, what you offer, all of those amazing things. And then I will start looking at the questions so we can answer some of those.
All right, folks, one of the easiest ways to find me is LinkedIn. I'm the only Jahmaal Marshall on LinkedIn, the only one across the globe, and the only one that spells it the way I do. So if you look at this name right here, all you have to do is pull that up. My profile will come up. I do offer one-on-one counseling for anyone who needs it. And that's a 12 weeks for the initial. And then we can go into a 6-month mastermind if you feel like you want to do phase 2. I tailor all that time based on what you need. So based on what you tell me during our consultation, which is about 30 minutes, that's going to design 12 weeks. I don't believe in highly automated and highly modulated stuff, especially when it's one-on-one, because it loses its personal touch, and then you lose actually addressing the need of the client specifically. And again, like I said earlier, they tried BetterHelp and then they found Jahmaal. So you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. That's the easiest place to find me. And Krista, if you can post the link to even that clarity call, if someone's thinking, okay, he's talking to me, or you see someone that needs this and the spotlight of heaven is on you, you feel like Jamaal's been reading my journal. I am more than happy and excited to actually work with you, come alongside you and get you some results. Right now, we're actually doing a complete upheaval of listenthanspeak.com. It had been mostly for Listen Then Speak Jahmaal as the podcaster, because I've been doing that for a couple of years, but now we're designing it where it shows Jahmaal the counselor and Jahmaal the consultant. So from an organizational standpoint, if you want to find me, you can just, if it's the leader of the organization, feel free to jump on a consultation, tell me what your organization needs, and then we can decide what the need is for your team, and specifically what the need of the members is, and actually designed, whether it's 2 to 4 or 4 to 6 months, specifically moving the needle forward and getting, more importantly, reducing turnover and maximizing productivity. That's my desire for any team, especially in this space of talent acquisition recruiting.
I think it's especially important for us, right? Because every organization sees turnover and retention problems, but as recruiters, we're the ones that then have to replace them, and it's a full cycle. So it's definitely something very important for us to focus on. So I encourage you all to reach out to him, start following him. I will get that link. I'm going to do it on my phone so I don't make my internet on my computer slower. But let's go to some of the questions. Someone shared, I really struggle with that boundary because I love what I do so much. So I don't feel like I'm giving anything up by responding to candidates or hiring managers at odd hours. Oh, that's something I struggle with too. I'll say, oh, but I love my job. I love doing what I'm doing. It doesn't feel like work to me. But the question is, how do you tell the difference between enjoying flexibility and having poor boundaries? That's a great question.
Ooh, that is a great question. Savannah better preach. Awesome. So I would say to that question, are you responding in joy or are you responding in anxiety? If you love what you do and it's a joy for you to respond and it's a joy for you to be there and to see them win and to prepare them to enter into an organization and it's not something that controls you, I would say that that's not poor boundaries. That's just you loving what you do and you being present to what you were created for. When it's something that it is, your heart starts beating, when it gets past a certain time, or you see a call or you see that alert, however it comes in different for counselors than it does for talent acquisition, like that alert, and you start to have dread, you're trafficking in terror, you're terrorized by that thing, and you feel like it's a need that you have to meet and not one that you get to meet. That would be when you start to actually ask yourself, okay, is fear the motivation for this, or is fulfillment the motivation? I hope that answers the question for Savannah.
I think that's a pretty good explanation. Savannah, let us know if you want him to dig into that a little bit more. Dina also had a really good question because some recruiters do work on commission-based only. So she said, I find it hard to set boundaries because I'm strictly commission-based. I feel like if I don't take that 8 p.m. call, am I going to get that placement? Is someone going to beat me to it? What about people who live in that commission space?
Yeah, and that's when it is so important for people, someone like Tina, to get behind the psychology of what they're thinking. The funny thing is that in the talent acquisition process, they may already have that person. They may have already met that person, and so a lot of times you can gloss over a candidate who actually may be qualified, may be a better fit, but the person you have your eyes on and the person you've been talking to is not the best fit. It's just the person you've taken the most interest in. And so I would just want to speak to that by saying specifically, if you don't take that, you may not get the placement, but you actually may get 2 placements or 3 placements once you learn to maximize your productivity and get behind your belief system and why you're approaching acquisition the way you approach it. I hope that makes sense, and I hope she finds that pragmatic, because a lot of times it's all about what we believe. It's all about what we think. Our mind is a control tower to the body. Our mind is the epicenter of our output. And many of us, especially since COVID, we've joined this online world, and we've all gotten on LinkedIn, because I know that's where most of us function, but we're not linked in to the way we think. We're not present to parts of our past that actually make us most productive for our present and our future.
Ooh, you need to coin that phrase. That's a good one. I've never heard you say that. We're LinkedIn, but we're not LinkedIn. That's pretty good. I like that. All right, I did put the Calendly link in and your LinkedIn profile, so I found that. For people, another great question is, can we talk about the mental health impact of job loss and job search? We need to be mindful of how our candidates may be struggling during this process. And I think that's very insightful, because people are really struggling and the mental health of looking for a job can be impossible. So how can we be more insightful in this?
I would say also the pressure, because talent acquisition and recruiters are under such pressure. Many times they want to be mindful, but they find like, I gotta get this staffed. I gotta fill this role. And so when you slow down and begin to understand your own mental health and think about where you were in the process when you didn't have a job and when you were searching, it helps you to be more mindful. Just like we're going to go back to Covey's quote, seek to understand rather than be understood. It takes slowing down. And I would say this from a managerial or a CEO standpoint, obviously, you guys are only going to respond to numbers. You're only going to respond to the quantifiable numbers. But if you want to reduce turnover, if you want to keep institutional knowledge, it's important that you increase headcount so that recruiters and people in talent acquisition have the time to learn to maximize their compassion towards those who are in the job search, so they maximize their roadmap with said candidate. There's recruiters who will walk with you through the whole process that really want to see you win and put a high premium on what they do, but they need the time to do that. And when you come into the organization, a lot of times, because of where mental health is these days, people are coming into organizations already burnt out. You've come onto the job, you got the dream job, but your mind is already moving at 1,000. And so is your productivity at an all-time high? And could your next turnover or your exit or your resignation or your quiet quitting be closer than you think? These are just
Mhm.
some of the things that I think about.
Absolutely. I think that's real life, that people are coming burnt out. And I think with a lot of trauma from their workplace. And I was that person once too. I went to a new employer and I would warn her before I would go take a lunch break. It was work from home, that I was still telling her if I needed to step away. And finally she brought me into a meeting and she looked at me and she said, I need to know why you're so worried about me knowing that you're going to step away from your desk. And I said, because I came from a place where if you walked away from your desk, you got in trouble for it. And they questioned where you were. And it could have been a lunch break. It could have been a 15-minute break. It could have been going to get my kid for a doctor's appointment. But I came from an organization where I was questioned and drilled on everything. And there was no space for me to exist as a human. And she was so compassionate. She understood. She had that crucial conversation with me. And she said, but I trust you to do the work. And we worked through it and I got a little bit better and I slowly stopped warning her every time I needed to step away. But those traumas that we bring with us from our workplaces, they can be really long lasting if we don't take that time to work through it and have honest conversations about it. And then as recruiters, if we are not in our best spot as empaths and as people pleasers, how can we give our best selves to our candidates when we want to convince them to come to our job? Right? Candidates are not just recruiting. They're not just applying for one job. They're probably applying for all the jobs and interviewing at who knows how many. If we can't convince them to come to work with us because our burnout is evident and it's written all across our faces, then we're damaging the work that we could potentially be doing and destroying the very thing that we're trying to build up, like you said before.
Yeah, that's the thing, is once you hit that wall, you're close to hitting that wall. The very thing you built up so much and built up your own brand. And I know some of you all are not just recruiters, some of you all are career coaches. You will unwittingly tear it down with your own hands, just because you're not taking time to deal with your own mental health, your own wellness, your own psychology, and really the codependency that we come to this profession with. You know, a lot of times we can see it written, we can agree with it. Oh, I 100% agree that I'm not my job. But sometimes we begin to identify with, this is the very thing that's my identity, and how to actually
Mhm.
break that down and get to the dichotomy where you approach your job from a healthy standpoint and you deal with candidates from a healthy standpoint, even with all the impending pressures.
Absolutely. All right. We have 4 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions, I welcome you to put them here. I know that this is a sensitive topic. I know that this is raw and real talk that we are sharing with you today, with no stone unturned in what we believe in. So you may feel more comfortable reaching out to him directly, which I encourage you to, as a person who will listen and speak and work through these things with you. If no one else has anything, Savannah said, this is helping me see why I experienced burnout before. I knew it happened and I knew I had to take action, but I didn't really understand that I was letting anxiety motivate my actions. Not a question, just a thank you. So not a question, but I wanted to share that, Savannah, in case people are keeping up with the chat, because I think it's important to look back and see what we've done before so that we don't do it again. And I hope that everyone takes advantage of that as well. People who are watching later, I know we have a lot of our audience, because this is a global association. A lot of people will watch this on the replay if they can't be here at 12:30. It's almost past dinner time in the UK where we have a lot of people. So this will be watched a lot on the replay as well. Thank you so much, Jahmaal. I knew that this would be a great conversation, and I appreciate everything you've shared with us. I know this will help our community a lot. And I do encourage people, we have to stand together as a community. We have to focus on our mental health for each other. And if you don't know what your blind spots are, then reach out to someone who can work with you on it, because it would be better off for you, for your family, for your job, your candidates. It's the ripple effect all down the line. So thank you very much. Savannah is my lovely recruiter realm comrade who always does our picture. So Jahmaal, she's going to take our picture, but everyone else, you are free to go if you don't have any other questions. Thank you for being here. Roundtable next week, we're going to come back and talk all about this. So I look forward to seeing you all there as well. And Savannah, I'm ready if Jahmaal's ready. She maybe got it.
Are we done with our awkward smiling?
Let's keep
Hopefully
going.
she got it.
She'll
Oh, man.
let us know. She'll let us know.
I'm thankful for
Okay.
everyone that took an hour out to spend with us. And I know we talked about a lot of things that were pretty deep and pretty heavy, but there's a great need for this. Love what I do. And I definitely want to see the mental health of recruiters and people in talent acquisition maximize, and really take advantage of not just some quack who calls himself a coach that got a license during April 2020, but someone that's been doing this for over 10 years. So
More
these
than
are
breath work and bubble bath.
no breath work and no bubble baths, hard work that actually gets results. But these are the conversations that actually get us started thinking about things that we normally wouldn't even consider, especially in this field. Mental health is definitely got to be put on a premium for managers and staff alike.
Absolutely. All right. That's time. Thank you. I'll let you get back to your busy day. I know I've got one too, but I appreciate you, and we will talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Grace and peace, my friend.